Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving deep into a text a lot of us feel like we know pretty well, the New Testament. But we're going to be looking at it through a really fascinating and honestly pretty radical new lens based on our source material for this explainer. So let's just jump right in.
So, let's kick things off with a question that really gets to the heart of what we're talking about today. What if the towering figures of the early church, the main heroes of the story, what if they weren't actually different people at all? What if they were, well, clones of each other? I know, it sounds a little wild, so let's unpack where an idea like this even comes from. Okay, so to understand this, we need to go to the book of Acts. This is the part of the New Testament that tells the story of how the Christian church got started and just exploded in growth right after Jesus' time. And it's a book that's absolutely jam-packed with these heroic figures who really built the foundation of the faith. Now, the traditional way we read this gives us two main stars. You've got Peter, the rock, who's leading the charge with the Jewish community, mostly based in Jerusalem. And then you have Paul, the great missionary, traveling all over the place, taking the message to the non-Jewish world, the Gentiles. So two different guys, two totally vital but separate missions. At least, that's the story we've all heard. But now, let's throw a wrench in that. Our source for today's explainer offers a very different take. It's a really radical theory that flips this whole traditional view of these distinct heroes right on its head. So here it is, the core idea from our source. The main characters in the book of Acts aren't really historical figures in the way we think of them. Instead, they're literary creations. Basically, they're fabricated clones, all based on a single template. It's a huge claim, so let's see exactly who we're talking about. And listen, this isn't just about Peter and Paul. The theory actually pulls in other major leaders. The argument is that Peter, Paul, James, who was the head of the church back in Jerusalem, and even Stephen, the very first martyr, are all cut from the exact same literary cloth. We are not talking about some background characters here. These are the pillars of the entire story. Okay, so you're probably asking what on earth would lead someone to a conclusion like that? Well, the entire theory is built on spotting a whole series of, uncanny similarities in the text itself. And this is where the evidence gets really specific. The source points out that if you actually break down these characters' stories, they start to look shockingly repetitive. They give speeches that have the same basic structure. They perform incredibly similar miracles, and their personal stories follow almost identical plot points. The argument is that it's kind of like watching this same movie over and over, just with a different actor's name on the poster. So it all boils down to this one simple but pretty profound observation. The argument is that if you just strip away the names and you strip away the locations, you're not left with a bunch of different people. You're left with the exact same guy, just, copied and pasted. So, who is this one character that they're all supposedly based on? Well, the source calls it an ideal character who represents orthodoxy. A perfect model, you could say. But what does that word orthodoxy really mean here? And this leads us to the biggest question of all. Why? I mean, if the author of Acts really did create these character clones, what was the end game? What was the purpose of a literary move like that? All right, first, let's just nail down this key term. Orthodoxy. In this context, it's about a belief system or a way of thinking that's being pushed as the one and only true and correct version of Christianity. It kind of smooths over any debates or different points of view. And right there, that's the alleged motive. The source argues that the author of Acts wanted to paint a picture of a perfectly unified early church, a church where every single leader was on the exact same page. So, by making all your heroes literal clones who think and talk alike, you basically erase any real historical conflict or disagreement. You create this false narrative of perfect harmony. So how would an author even pull something like this off? Well, the theory lays out a pretty simple three-step playbook. Step 1, you design your perfect orthodox hero. Step 2, you just clone that character a few times. And then Step 3, you disguise the copies by giving them different names and, crucially, different travel routes. And that right there is the key to the whole disguise. According to this theory, the only real thing that separates these guys isn't their beliefs, it's not their personalities, it's not even their message, it's just their travel itinerary. The difference isn't theological, it's just geographical.
And you can see how this disguise would work with their travel plans. James is the anchor, right? He's the version of the hero who stays put in Jerusalem. Peter is kind of the next model up. He travels a little bit, ventures out, and then Paul becomes the ultimate traveler, the final clone, who's designed to take this one single message to the farthest corners of the map. They're all the same model, just with different battery life.
So, let's zoom out. What are the bigger implications of reading a text like Acts through this kind of lens? What does it really mean for how we understand this foundational story? Okay. So to wrap this all up, what is this theory really asking us to think about? First, that the heroes of Acts might be less like historical figures and more like powerful literary tools. Second, that they all stand for one single orthodox ideal. Third, their whole purpose was to project this image of perfect unity, maybe even at the cost of what really happened. And finally, the really big one, this whole way of thinking throws a major challenge at the historical accuracy of the text itself. And that leaves us with one last, really important question to chew on. Whether you buy this theory or not, it forces us to ask, how does an idea like this change the way we read not just the Bible, but any ancient historical text? It's a reminder to always ask, who's telling the story, what might their agenda be, and what could a perfectly polished narrative actually be hiding underneath? Thanks for joining us on The Explainer.